Today I'd like to conclude our reflections on chapter 10 of the Gospel of Matthew and cover verses 40 to 42, which concludes chapter 10. This section talks about the rewards that one gets, and kind of a nice balancing out, because this has been a very challenging section in the Gospel of Matthew. We talked about following Jesus in terms of the dedication that's needed. We have to take up our cross and follow him. There's going to be persecution. Families will display discord. Fathers will turn against their sons, and daughters against their mothers. All these hard things are happening. And of course, as you look at that and reflect on what Jesus is saying, there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of discord sometimes within families about religion and faith. We know that. There are a lot of challenges that we face in trying to proclaim the gospel. People will tell us they're not interested. They want to do other things. Religion is too controversial. Going to church is boring. We hear all of those thoughts. And so to proclaim the gospel and share this good news that Jesus has come to love us, and that he's calling us to love God and love our sisters and brothers, that can be a very challenging thing. So it's nice to see that there's some rewards involved. So Jesus says in verse 40, "Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me." So this is nice to hear. If someone is receiving us, if someone is accepting the gospel, if someone is saying, "Tell me more about the good news," they are really connecting with Jesus, and they're receiving him, which is a beautiful thing. So if we come to someone and share, and they are receptive, they are receiving Jesus through us. And of course, that is a great blessing and a great privilege for us to be part of that, to be an instrument whereby somebody is receiving Jesus. And those who receive Jesus are not just only receiving him, they're receiving the one who sent Jesus. And the one who sent Jesus is God. So we look at that and say, that is amazing. They're receiving Jesus, they're receiving God. And so our efforts, which seem difficult and challenging, obviously, when they are successful, are overwhelming in terms of their result. Imagine someone, from something you said or a kind action that you did, imagine that person receiving Jesus. We often think of ourselves and receiving communion and what a blessed moment it is, and that feeling of closeness to Jesus. But in a way, you become that communion. You become that instrument whereby somebody is receiving Jesus, and receiving God, and receiving the Holy Spirit. So, is there any greater reward that one could think of? Certainly not. I mean, that is an amazing reward that we receive. And so when we see all those challenges and difficulties and struggles within families and rejection, persecution, that can be very off-putting and disturbing for us. We can say, what did I get myself into here? But when you think of the reward that someone is getting connected to Jesus through your efforts, certainly guided by the Holy Spirit and guided by Jesus, that is an amazing reward. It is a mind-boggling reward. It is a reward beyond any reward that we could hope for or ever imagine. So Jesus gives us that sense of balance. There is struggle, there is challenge, but there is reward, amazing reward. And this tells us that Jesus is encountered through those who proclaim the gospel. So when you proclaim the gospel and share the gospel, it's not an encounter with you, it's an encounter with Jesus, because you are sharing the good news of Jesus. You're not sharing your personal good news. My daughter had a child, I had a birthday, we had a great celebration, and all of those wonderful things, of course. But what you're sharing really is the good news of Jesus. And so as you share that good news, you are encountering the presence of Jesus. You have been touched by Jesus. You feel loved by Jesus. And so you want to share that with certainly your words, but even more importantly, by your actions of kindness and love. And then in verse 41, Jesus says, whoever receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever receives a righteous man because he is righteous will receive a righteous man's reward. So again, amazing that this tremendous sharing of grace for those who have received the gifts of prophecy and of righteousness. So if one is a prophet, that person will get a prophet's reward. If one is a righteous person, a person who tries to follow God's law and God's will in their life, they will receive that reward as well. So again, just tremendous words of consolation. Sometimes we think, I'm not getting any rewards here. But Jesus is saying quite the contrary. You are getting tremendous rewards. And then in verse 42, to conclude chapter 10, Jesus says, and whoever gives only a cup of cold water to one of these little ones to drink, because he is a disciple, and then I say to you, he will surely not lose his reward. And in giving a drink, we see in Matthew 25, 35, and 42, when we give it to someone, we are giving it to Jesus. When we don't give it to someone, we are not giving it to Jesus. When Jesus says that if you give it to one of these little ones, Jesus is saying, these are the disciples. So if you are generous to the disciples, they are the little ones. They are the little ones because they are faithful. And they are not seeking reward, they're not seeking notoriety. But when you give something to them, you will be rewarded. You will be remembered. And in a way, when you give it to them, you're giving it to Jesus. So as we look back on chapter 10, we see really a tremendous teaching about becoming a disciple, how we should become a disciple, how we should put Jesus first, how we should not worry about what we're going to say. The Holy Spirit will help us. Not worry about all the things we have to take on the journey, the cloaks and the sandals. The most important thing is to be in prayer and connected to Jesus. And when we are, in that sense, there's going to be struggles. There are going to be difficulties. It's not easy. There's no rose-colored glasses here. Jesus is not painting a picture of ease and comfort for us. He's saying it's going to be difficult and challenging, but he is saying that there are rewards that we receive. And I think most of us who have been involved in ministry or have tried to respond to our baptismal call and tried to do the will of God in our lives will acknowledge that there have been many rewards along the way. And of course, the greatest reward of all is to realize the deepening love of Jesus within.